How's it going, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Steven Talks, and today I am going to talk about the year 1985 in movies. Now, I know that seems a little weird and uber specific, but I got this idea because a while back I had watched about, 3 or 4 movies pretty close together, and completely different movies from each other, different genres. Just each movie had its own different feel. And when I started looking into them, I realized that they all had the same thing in common. And that was that they had been released in 1985. And I thought, wow, like what other movies were released in 1985? So I looked it up and I'm just like, holy hell, man, like that was a stacked year as far as cinema was concerned. And so I thought, well, it would be kind of cool to do a video where we look at some of my favorite movies that came out in that year. So some of them are ones that everyone knows. Some of them are ones that maybe you haven't heard of, but hopefully after watching this video, you'll seek out. Others are movies where you're just like, I don't see this movie existing in any sort of time period. Like it takes place in a whole nother realm. So let's get it started. I have to start with my absolute favorite movie from 1985. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. It's been one of my favorite movies of all time ever since my mother took me to see this at the movie theater in 1985 when it came out. And I have a distinct memory of standing in front of the movie poster while she was over at the ticket booth buying tickets. I'm standing in front of the poster for this movie and just thinking to myself, oh my God, like this is going to be the best movie I've ever seen. And I was not disappointed at all. And that was The Goonies, man. The Goonies came at just the right time for me. Like, I was really only a few years younger than the actors in this movie. And I ate every second of this movie up. And this movie's been a constant throughout my life. Speaking of that movie poster, it's the original theatrical poster of The Goonies, which is the one where Bran is hanging from this, it's stalagmite, whichever one hangs down. He's hanging on to that, while the rest of the Goonies are like hanging on to each other's legs, dangling down over this like huge view of One-Eyed Willie's treasure map. And that was the poster that I stared at like, oh my God. That poster right now is framed and hanging in my kitchen. And my kids love The Goonies. They have become fans of this movie. And I guess they kind of had to, because every morning at breakfast and lunch and dinner, they're staring at these characters. So it's like The Goonies have become part of their home. But yeah, I love The Goonies. I will always love The Goonies. Another little comedy that came out in 1985 that is one that I watched constantly growing up. I still love to this day. That is Real Genius. Starring a young Val Kilmer when he was just in his prime. I don't know if he had done Top Secret yet. Maybe he either did that before or after this movie. But Real Genius is the story of a kid named Mitch who is in, I think he's like, in middle school? Maybe like a freshman in high school. And he gets accepted into this technology school, this college. And he's like the youngest person that's ever been accepted. And when he goes there, he is roomed with Val Kilmer's character, Chris Knight, who is a genius, but he's also just crazy. He's goofy. He's really silly and funny and loves to party. And so Mitch, discovers what it's like to, let your guard down and unbutton that top button on your little nerdy shirt and just enjoy life. With also the subplot of the professor is also working for the government, and they're trying to get the genius kids to build a laser so that the government can use it to laser their enemies from space, because that's part of that movie as well. But it also has a banger of a soundtrack. Like, one of my biggest memories of that movie was, I think that was the first time I ever heard Everybody Wants to Rule the World from Tears for Fears, because it plays over the end credits. It's a great movie. It's really fun. It's really funny. Val Kilmer kills it through the whole movie. It's a good time. So, speaking of actors killing it, in 1985, that year pretty much belonged to one Michael J. Fox. This guy was already a successful TV actor on Family Ties, and he was trying to get, his career in movies going. And 1985 was the year that really broke him as far as being a megastar, because of this tiny little independent film called Back to the Future. Yeah, it's Back to the Future, dude. This movie is probably one of the greatest sci-fi comedies ever made. The story of a dude named Marty, who is friends with this old kooky eccentric scientist who builds a time machine out of a DeLorean, and through a series of events inadvertently sends Marty back to the year that his parents got together in the 50s. And Marty, through another series of events, ends up getting his mom to develop a huge crush on him, and she spends the whole movie wanting to jump his bones, which is not creepy in the slightest bit. Why would you even think that? But Back to the Future, again, it's such a well-made movie. It's iconic. It's always a good time to watch it. Also in 1985, because of the success of Back to the Future, because Michael J. was now, huge, they were like, well, we got this other movie that Michael J. was actually filming while he was making Back to the Future. Yes, he was filming this other movie during the days, and then at night he would go to the Universal Studios lot and would film Back to the Future. So dude was getting like no sleep. But the movie he was filming before Back to the Future was the wonderful Teen Wolf. Again, the story of a little dude named Scott Howard, who is like the shortest guy to ever play basketball. He just wants to be popular. He doesn't want to be average. And his wish is granted when he realizes that he's a werewolf, which, of course, causes him to kind of freak out at first. But then it turns out if you're a werewolf, you can ball, son. Like, you are going to be one of the best basketball players that ever existed. And Teen Wolf proves that. So who knew, right? But again, this is a movie I grew up watching a million times. I know that a lot of horror fans hate this movie because they're like, werewolves don't play basketball. But it's like, yeah, we figure that, man. But it's fun, So because of the success of Back to the Future, Teen Wolf would become a huge hit as well. And with those two movies out, man, Michael J. Fox owned the middle of the 80s at that point. Now moving on to like the teen movies that were huge in the 80s. One of the biggest names director-wise that you can think of when it comes to teen movies is John Hughes. He had made 16 Candles, and then in 1985, he gave us The Breakfast Club. This movie had a chokehold on the teen scene in the middle of the 80s. This is a movie that I used to have a copy of this on VHS, and I wore it out. Like, if I had to, I could probably recite this entire movie off the top of my head. I memorized the dialogue. And I used to absolutely adore the movie, especially Bender, the bad boy right there. I thought he was the coolest dude in the world. Then I got older. And it had been a long time since I had watched The Breakfast Club. And, you know, things change, like times change. And you start looking at this movie that you grew up with, and you're like, man, Bender is a really skeezy dude, man. He does a lot of creepy stuff toward Molly Ringwald in this movie. And some of the stuff he says is pretty messed up, man. And also too, it's the idea that these kids were all in detention in Saturday school and stuff. And at the end of the movie, they all kind of tell their stories of why they were in detention. And some of that's pretty problematic too, man. Like, I mean, I get that the jock is in there because he was trying to impress his jock friends and apparently taped some nerdy dude's hairy butt cheeks together. Like that. Okay, all right, yeah, I could see you getting detention for that. Molly Ringwald's character, Claire, who's the popular girl, she skipped school to go shopping. I mean, I get that as well. But the nerdy dude, played by Anthony Michael Hall, preview of the next movie, my bad. Anthony Michael Hall is in there because he was doing a shop class and he had to make an elephant and he couldn't make it because he wasn't very good at shop, but he's a straight A student and he felt he was going to get an F in the class, so he brought a gun to school. And he's like, I had it in my locker and, I brought this gun to school. And everyone's like, why did you bring a gun to school? And he never answers the question. You don't know, like, did he bring the gun to school because he was going to shoot himself? Did he bring the gun to school because he was going to shoot the teacher? Did he bring the gun to school because he was going to shoot other people? I mean, kind of the joke at the end of it, he's like, well, it was a flare gun, and it went off in my locker. That's how I got caught. And they all start laughing. And it's like, hold on, man. Like, back up here. Like, he brought a gun to school. Yes, it was a flare gun, but he brought a gun to school. And when they ask him, why did you bring a gun to school? He doesn't answer it. He goes, I can't have an F. I can't bring down my average. And it's like, buddy, like, you need to send this kid to the guidance counselor, man, because something is not right here. So, John Hughes's movies are interesting because, like, they're very much fantasy versions of high school. They're fantasy versions of being a teenager. They're essentially him vicariously living through these characters he created. When you start looking at all of John Hughes's movies, he wishes he was Bender. He wishes he was the bad boy in high school. He wishes that he was Ferris Bueller, like the most popular kid in school that if he misses a day, everyone freaks out because they think he's dying. He really did try to recreate his youth by being cooler in these movies. So the John Hughes movies, they are what they are. They're funny, they're fun and stuff like that, but they're really not a good indication of what it was like to be a teenager. That would be this other movie that came out in 1985, which I already showed you. This is a movie called Smooth Talk. This deals with teenagers in the 80s. This stars a very young Laura Dern, a much older Treat Williams, and Laura plays this girl who she's just kind of discovering what it's like to go and hang out with the high school boys and stuff like that. She knows she's pretty, so she knows that if she wears certain outfits, she can get their attention. And she's very much caught up in being a teenager. Well, the entire movie, out in the periphery of everything, is this guy, Treat Williams, who, sees her and, doesn't talk to her at first. But then at one point in the movie, when they're at this hangout, he comes up to her and he's like, "Hey girl," he's like, "I'm gonna get you one day." And she's just kind of like, "Oh," but you're kind of like, what does that mean? And this movie, the whole thing does kind of play like almost like an after school special, a teen drama dealing with a girl who's coming of age, and she's fights with her mom all the time and stuff like that. But the last, I'd say 20 minutes of the movie is one scene where she decides that she is going to stay home while her parents and her sister go to a barbecue, and he shows up and he knocks on her door and basically is like, "I want you to come take a ride with me." And, she puts on the flirting thing and she's like, "Oh no, I got to stay here. You don't want to ride with me and stuff." And he's like, "No, really." He's like, "I'm not leaving until you come take a ride with me." And the scene just progresses and progresses. And he does not budge. He is very insistent. "No, I'm not leaving here until you come take a ride with me." And she begins to get more and more concerned. The flirting drops. She's like, "Okay, now I told you no, I don't want to do this." And it just keeps going and keeps going. And suddenly you feel like you're almost in a horror movie, because this guy is stalking her and will not take no for an answer. And the acting between these two in that scene is just this incredible, like almost ballet of two actors who are just kind of, it's like this choreographed tension that just builds and builds and builds. And I think it's a phenomenal movie. I think it is criminally underrated. I think it's a movie that more and more people need to talk about. And as far as a teen movie of the 80s, this movie dealt with real life situations. This wasn't, "Oh, I got Saturday school because I skipped school to go shopping." No, this is sometimes, well, not even sometimes, all the time, men are going to turn their attention to younger women. And these younger women have to know that, and they have to be ready for that and to be wary of that, because these men are not trustworthy at all. And that's some real life shit, man. And Smooth Talk does that. So if you've never seen this, please give it a chance. It's an incredible movie. I loved it the first time I watched it. So since we were talking about movies delving into scary stuff, now we got to talk about two movies that came out in 1985 that are two of the biggest movies in the horror genre, because both of them are an absolute blast. And they actually have a through line and a commonality. The first one, I love this movie. This is one of my comfort movies. If I ever feel bad, if the world is just not going the way that I want it to, I pop this movie on, and you know what? By the end of it, I feel much better. That's Return of the Living Dead, man. This is such a fantastic movie. Punk rock zombies, man. This is the silly, goofy story of a dude, and I think it's his uncle. They're working at the You Need a Medical Supply warehouse. And the uncle starts telling him, like, because he asks, he's like, "Well, what's the weirdest thing you've ever seen in a medical supply warehouse?" And he's like, "Well, I gotta tell you, like, have you ever seen the movie Night of the Living Dead?" Well, in Return of the Living Dead, that movie exists. And he's like, "Actually, that movie was based in fact. And it just so happens we have this canister down in the basement that has one of the living dead in it, that has all this gas called trioxin." And they go down there to look at it. They end up releasing the gas into the air, which causes a thunderstorm, which causes this rain that's like an acid rain with the trioxin in it that rains right on the graveyard that is right outside of the warehouse, and the dead start to rise. And man, this movie, like I said, it is so goofy. It is so silly, but it is so fun. It has a killer punk rock soundtrack. It's endlessly quotable. It's such a fun time. So yeah, Return of the Living Dead is amazing. Now, that same year, Return of the Living Dead is indebted to, of course, George Romero's Dead movies. This is the man that in the 1960s, he gave us Night of the Living Dead. In the 1970s, he gave us the equally amazing sequel, Dawn of the Dead. And in 1985, he made the third movie in his Dead series, which is Day of the Dead. And Day of the Dead, whoo, this movie it's probably one of his bleakest movies story-wise. Like, at this point in the story of everything, the living dead have just taken over the world. Like, there's very small amounts of people even left that have not been killed or turned into zombies. And so these scientists, along with a few members of the military, are they've holed up in this underground government bunker. And the scientists are doing studies on any of the living dead that they can catch. So they're trying to figure out, why are they rising from the dead? Like, what can we do with this information? While the military is essentially there to protect them. Now, this movie deals more with the fact that when you put a group of people together who don't really have a lot in common, they're going to start butting heads. And after they start butting heads, they're going to start hating each other. And after they start hating each other, all bets are off. So the members of the military in this movie are portrayed as just like goons and hotheads, and just like they have no patience for what these scientists are trying to do. And the scientists are trying their hardest to figure out this whole zombie apocalypse that's happening. But not only does this movie have just a bleak feeling, but practical effect wise, the great Tom Savini, who did amazing work on Dawn of the Dead, was back for Day of the Dead. And this movie has some set pieces, especially during the finale, that are just gnarly. Like some of the best gore moments you've ever seen in a horror movie. And it also has, quite possibly one of my favorite characters in a horror movie. And that's this guy. That's Bub. Bub is a zombie who, the main doctor, or the main scientist, that they call him Dr. Frankenstein, he has found Bub, and he keeps Bub chained up in this room. But the thing about Bub is that he is the first of the living dead who seems to have retained memories of what it's like to be alive. He is not aggressive at all. Like he's still a zombie. I mean, he will chow down on a bucket of organs if you give it to him. But he's not really concerned with trying to eat your face off if you come around him. And so they do things like give him a book, which was a copy of Salem's Lot from Stephen King. And they put headphones on him to let him listen to music, which you can see in this picture. And it turns out Bub, they figure out he was ex-military, because when he sees the soldiers come in, he salutes them. And the actor that plays Bub is a guy named Howard Sherman, who is fantastic in that role. He makes you fall in love with Bub, because, it would have been so easy for him to just overdo the character and kind of make it more of like a caricature of a zombie. And every time you think he's going to tip over the edge into that, he reins it in. And it's an amazing performance. And it actually is, funny enough, it's the heart and soul of this movie. So if you're a fan of Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead and you've never seen Day of the Dead, by all means, man, give it a shot. It's a fantastic movie. All right, so I'm gonna end this on a movie that we've just talked about horror movies. This is a movie that is probably one of the most horrifying movies I have ever seen in my life. And I think it's a masterpiece. This is a movie from Russia that I still can't believe this is an 80s movie. It does not feel like an 80s movie. I don't know, it's a timeless movie. But that is Come and See. Come and See is one of the most, I say brutal, but I mean that just as far as what it does just to you mentally. It's a rough movie to sit through in many of the scenes, but it's also strangely beautiful in many scenes. Anyway, it's about this boy named Fliora who he lives in Belarusia, and the Nazis are invading the area. And so there are these Soviet resistance fighters that have sprung up that are trying to fight the Nazis. And so the beginning of the movie has the boy digging in the ground and he finds a rifle. And he's so excited because he can show these resistance fighters, like, look, I have a weapon, I want to join up. Because he has this view of fighting in war that, you know, it's glorious, it's noble. You know, there's no finer thing in life than to be a soldier fighting in war. And so these resistance fighters are like, all right, kid, come on. You know, you got a weapon, you can join us. And so he leaves his mother and his siblings. And I mean, really to say any more would be a disservice to you if you're ever interested in wanting to see this. But what I have to warn you is that this movie shows what happens when you idealize, either one of those words. When you think highly of a situation and it turns out that the reality of that situation is horrifying. Fliora experiences war. He experiences death. He experiences the utter depravity of human cruelty. And this movie does not flinch away in showing that. The director would actually fire live rounds over these actors' heads. And that's another thing too, is that when you watch this movie, it is so just, it's, I can't for the life of me imagine at any point in this movie them filming a scene and then the director going, okay, cut. And all the actors kind of relax and are like, all right, cool. You know, like, it feels almost like you're watching a documentary. It does not feel like actors acting, but it's a beautifully shot movie. At the end of it, it is something that really makes you think. It makes you want to discuss it with people. I can't say enough good things about it. I will warn you, you have to be ready for this movie because it is not an easy watch, but it is a very rewarding watch in my opinion. So yeah, there you go. Those are just a tiny amount of the films that were released in 1985. I mean, there's some others too. Honorable mentions go to Martin Scorsese's After Hours, which is a great movie. It's a movie that I call why people don't really want to go out at night and hang out when you're introverted. This movie is the nightmare scenario of that. There's Pee-wee's Big Adventure. That was 1985. That introduced us to Tim Burton and the Pee-wee Dance and Large Marge. So, and there's plenty of other movies that came out that year that I haven't even talked about. So, yeah, hopefully this video may spark your interest in wanting to either rewatch these movies because they're so great, or maybe you want to check them out because you've never seen them. I can't recommend them enough. Thank you so much for watching me trip over my words and talk about movies. I will talk to you again at a later day. Take it easy, y'all.